In the proposition, the thought is expressed perceptibly through the senses. We use the sensibly perceptible sign, sound or written sign and so on, of the proposition as a projection of the possible state of affairs. The method of projection is the thinking of the sense of the proposition. The sign through which we express the thought I call the propositional sign. And the proposition is the propositional sign in its projective relation to the world. To the proposition belongs everything which belongs to the projection, but not what is projected. Therefore, the possibility of what is projected, but not this itself. In the proposition, therefore, its sense is not yet contained, but the possibility of expressing it. The content of the proposition means the content of the significant proposition. In the proposition, the form of its sense is contained, but not its content. The propositional sign consists in the fact that its elements, the words, are combined in it in a definite way. The propositional sign is a fact. The proposition is not a mixture of words, just as the musical theme is not a mixture of tones. The proposition is articulate. Only facts can express a sense, a class of names cannot. That the propositional sign is a fact is concealed by the ordinary form of expression, written or printed. For in the printed proposition, for example, the sign of a proposition does not appear essentially different from a word. Thus, it was possible for Frege to call the proposition a compounded name. The essential nature of the propositional sign becomes very clear when we imagine it made up of special objects such as tables, chairs, books, instead of written signs. The mutual spatial position of these things then expresses the sense of the proposition. We must not say the complex sign ARB says A stands in relation R to B, but we must say that A stands in a certain relation to B says that ARB. States of affairs can be described but not named. Names resemble points, propositions resemble arrows, they have sense. In propositions, thoughts can be so expressed that to the objects of the thoughts correspond the elements of the propositional sign. These elements I call simple signs and the proposition completely analyzed. The simple signs employed in propositions are called names. The name means the object. The object is its meaning. A is the same sign as A. To the configuration of the simple signs in the propositional sign corresponds the configuration of the object in the state of affairs. In the proposition, the name represents the object. Objects I can only name, signs represent them. I can only speak of them, I cannot assert them. A proposition can only say how a thing is, not what it is. The postulate of the possibility of the simple signs is the postulate of the determinateness of the sense. A proposition about a complex stands in internal relation to the proposition about its constituent part. A complex can only be given by its description, and this will either be right or wrong. The proposition in which there is mention of a complex, if this does not exist, becomes not nonsense but simply false. That a propositional element signifies a complex can be seen from an indeterminateness in the propositions in which it occurs. We know that everything is not yet determined by this proposition. The notation for generality contains a prototype. The combination of the symbols of a complex in a simple symbol can be expressed by a definition. There is one and only one complete analysis of the proposition. The proposition expresses what it expresses in a definite and clearly specifiable way. The proposition is articulate. The name cannot be analyzed further by any definition. It is a primitive sign. Every defined sign signifies via those signs by which it is defined, and the definitions show the way. Two signs, one a primitive sign and one defined by primitive signs, cannot signify in the same way. Names cannot be taken to pieces by a definition, nor any sign which alone and independently has a meaning. What does not get expressed in the sign is shown by its application. What the signs conceal, their application declares. The meanings of primitive signs can be explained by elucidations. Elucidations are propositions which contain the primitive signs. They can, therefore, only be understood when the meanings of these signs are already known. Only the proposition has sense. Only in the context of a proposition has a name meaning. Every part of a proposition which characterizes its sense I call an expression, a symbol. The proposition itself is an expression. Expressions are everything essential for the sense of the proposition that propositions can have in common with one another. An expression characterizes a form and the content. An expression presupposes the forms of all propositions in which it can occur. It is the common characteristic mark of a class of propositions. It is therefore represented by the general form of the propositions which it characterizes. And in this form the expression is constant and everything else is variable. An expression is thus presented by a variable whose values are the propositions which contain the expression. In the limiting case, the variables become constants, the expression a proposition. I call such a variable a propositional variable. An expression has meaning only in a proposition. every variable can be conceived of as a propositional variable, including the variable name. If we change a constituent part of a proposition into a variable, there is a class of propositions which are all the values of the resulting variable proposition. This class in general still depends on what, by arbitrary agreement, we mean by parts of that proposition. But if we change all those signs whose meaning was arbitrarily determined into variables, there always remains such a class. But this is now no longer dependent on any agreement. It depends only on the nature of the proposition. It corresponds to a logical form, to a logical prototype.